All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and we're recapping week number 2. That's right. A lot of upsets last week, but the man who is never upset with college football, my co-host, Fresh. Fresh, how you doing, buddy?
The only word I can think of right now, Haps, is glorious. Week 2 was glorious. Upsets, craziness. We got pit tight ends hurdling volunteer defenders and going for touchdowns. Coast to coast, noon kicks to midnight. Fantastic, all across the board.
Midnight. I woke up at about 2:30 in the morning last night and saw that the Baylor BYU game was still going on.
What do we call that? Independence way after night, after dark?
I don't know what we want to call that one. Fresh, we got a lot to talk about. So there's some good, there's some bad. You want to start with good news or bad news first?
All right, I always like to get the bad news first. Let's start off with that.
All right, Fresh. So let's talk about the losers of this weekend. Who you got?
First loser, Notre Dame.
I figured.
I I had you in my playoff. I figured you lose to Ohio State. Just manage it and let the offense sort of grow as you went through the season, find ways to win football games and navigate the schedule and come out ahead. Um, it's not like you have a new offensive staff. Tommy Reese is still the offensive coordinator. He stayed with Marcus Freeman. That offensive line, they returned everybody. Michael Bayer's still there. You have a couple quarterbacks. Pine was still there. They bring in, the guy who's starting now, and there's just no flow to that offense. There's no separation from the receivers. There's no traction in the running game. Um, it it's painful to watch. I'm sure Notre Dame fans would agree. It is painful to watch the lack of offensive playmakers they have in that program right now. Defensively, I think they're doing the best they can. They're playing well, but they are just as a program. I think we all gave them a pass for the Ohio State game, but this Marshall loss. When you look at the whole football game too, they had 3 turnovers. But 2 of the turnovers were in the last 5 minutes of the football game. They score at the very beginning of the fourth quarter, take the lead, get the 2-point conversion, go up 15 to 12. And then the defense lets Marshall, the Thunder and Hurt. This is not the Chad Pennington, Byron Leftwich, Randy Moss, even Ali, the stud running back, wasn't playing. None of those superstars from Marshall history are on this football team. And they marched right down the field, scored the touchdown, take the lead. Notre Dame gets the ball back. They throw a pick 6. They get the ball back again. They start driving down the field. They throw a pick at the 20. Somehow they scored the last touchdown. I kind of turned it off at that. It was 26-21. It looked a lot closer than it was in the fourth quarter. Marshall dominated the fourth quarter, like good football teams are supposed to do. And they kind of started off the craziness of the Sun Belt rolling through and wrecking people's days across the spectrum of college football. But Notre Dame, this program right now, Marcus Freeman, you still don't have a win. You've gotten 2 passes, the Fiesta Bowl. You got to pass Ohio State, but this one was, I think, solely on you in developing this offense and developing this team to be able to play full 60 minutes and take care of business. There's a lot of teams that didn't take care of business this past weekend, and that's, you play cupcake or you play a lesser opponent, you think it's a guaranteed win. You have to show up every Saturday. We did not see a bunch of teams do that this week.
All right, Fresh. My first loser is Texas A&M, sitting at number 6 in the country. How many people did we see at the beginning of the year have this team as a playoff team? And both of us said very early on that Texas A&M team was extremely overrated. The problem is that Texas A&M, you don't have a quarterback. And without a quarterback, you're not going to win, and especially not going to be very competitive. Props to Appalachian State, though, going into a very, very tough environment like A&M and really taking the boots to them. Because if you look at the statistics of that game, A&M was completely dominated in every way, shape, and form. And they still had a chance to win it. Like, that was the crazy thing. Like, A&M, you had a Sunbelt team. You were talking about Marshall coming in. App State has possibly now 2 of the greatest upsets of all time. And their upset versus Michigan way back when we were living together. I still remember running through our house back then screaming. And then now Texas A&M, this is a very overrated team right now. And it really shows that you have no offensive firepower. They're a very good defense over there, but you gained less than 190 yards versus Appalachian State. They have 4 fumbles. They lost 2 of them. And then this defense that was heavily vaunted and going to be this amazing get to the quarterback. There's going to be pressure, and you're going to have zero time to throw. They had 1 sack, 0 tackles for a loss, and 4 quarterback hurries. There's absolutely no pass rush. Jimbo Fisher did a lot of talking, over this summer. And when you go into a game like this, you're not backing up that talk with actual wins on the field. I love that the SEC tagline is "It just means more." And it just means more to us now when you get blown out by a team like this. And when you say blown out, I'm telling you this, 17-14, that score should have been a whole lot more, because this game was not as close as that score indicates right there. I'm very disappointed in A&M, man. Very disappointed.
It was terrible. Chase Bryce and that offense for App State, they went off. Defense, they gave us 17 points, but Haynes King and that offense were abysmal. And it's funny how people always go around and they're like, you play the story of like so and so beat so and so, so then so and so they also beat someone. Like the whole like kind of the 6 separations of Kevin Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
Better than who? I mean, does this make North Carolina a really good football team? Because they beat App State by 2, but then App State beats A&M. Like, what in the world is happening? I mean, this is why college football is so crazy and so nuts. You have to show up every day.
Well, I think what these 2 losses prove this year, though, is we are moving away from it just being like one set or another. And it's been a conversation that me and you have had for a long time, actually, probably at least over the last year and a half. It's clear still the SEC is the best conference in college football. But the thing that has bothered myself and bothered, you at times there, Fresh, is that people want to act like there's not good football being played at another conference. Like there's not good teams somewhere else as well. And with Marshall going in and beating Notre Dame, and if you have a friend that's a Notre Dame fan, please check on them after today, because Marcus Freeman is the first coach to start 0-3 at Notre Dame. And then you have App State going into Texas A&M, beating them. And then you look at, we were all really, really down on the Pac-12. And look at some of the things that the Pac-12 did last night, too. So, again, guys, while we acknowledge that probably the 2 best conferences for football right now are the SEC and the Big Ten, that doesn't mean that there's bad football being played in our places.
You're right about that.
All right, Fresh, who's your next loser?
The Big Ten West. Yikes. Northwestern losing at home to Duke. Iowa finally losing the Cy-Hawk Trophy to Iowa State and scoring. They scored an opening drive. They scored a touchdown this time. They went right down the field, and they end up losing 10-7. The only points they scored was 12 minutes to go in the first quarter. Major, major issues there. The weird thing about Iowa, they have scored 14 points as a team. They've given up 13. So actually, they're still +1 in point differential for the season, but they're 1-1 on the year. It's Nebraska. Yikes. Another Sun Belt team, Georgia Southern, going into Lincoln, taking out Nebraska. Scott Frost, if you get stomped by Oklahoma next week, they might not let you back in the office. But I think the most weird loss was Wisconsin losing to Washington State, outgaining the Cougars by 150 yards, losing by a field goal, almost dominating the football game. Washington ran for like 62 yards. Badgers did whatever they really wanted, but defense was missing tackles in the fourth quarter. And in one drive, again, Graham Mertz gets hit, throws a pick. Somehow, the Washington State player fumbles the football. Badgers recover at the 26, 28-yard line, somewhere over there. And then that drive, they miss a field goal. And then they miss a field goal later on. They just know this is not a Badger offense that's moving. The defense did all they could. They can't get through. Iowa's defense doing all they can. Offense can't score. The other side, Nebraska at least scores points, but their defense can't stop anybody. The Big Ten West is a mess. Purdue, they beat Indiana State, but they lost to Penn State, so they have that conference loss in hand already. Minnesota, you're taking care of business like other teams haven't been, but we really don't know fully what you are because you've beaten New Mexico State and Western Illinois, but you are 2-0. Illinois might be the best team in the Big Ten West. That's saying a lot because they beat Virginia and they beat Wyoming, but they lost the tight one to Indiana. But Illinois, Minnesota, you are the poster boys right now of the Big Ten West, and that is Ohio State and Michigan State are licking their chops right now. They're so excited. There's no powerhouse going to be facing them in Indianapolis come December 2nd or 3rd.
Yeah, we're going to find out a lot about Minnesota here in a few weeks. They got Michigan State. They're traveling to East Lansing in week 4 there. I have Wisconsin as a loser too here, Fresh. You know, we all know how I feel about Graham Mertz. I think he's probably the worst quarterback in the Big Ten. I can hear all the way from Vegas. We have an Iowa fan that listens to us is saying Spencer Petras is the worst quarterback now. But you look at Wisconsin, 11 penalties, 106 yards, 3 turnovers. Games like that can't happen, especially at Camp Randall Stadium. I would understand if this was a road game. If you were traveling across country and you were going up against Oregon State or Washington State at their spot, then I kind of give you a little thing. But you have Braylon Allen, possibly one of the top 5 running backs in college football right now. And you gave 15 carries to your backup running back who is averaging 2.9 yards a carry. Like, who thinks this is a good idea? Take at least a couple. I don't care if you give him 10 carries, but you gave him only 6 less carries than Braylon Allen, and he didn't get the job done. I'm very disappointed in Wisconsin, man. And Minnesota, at least me and you picked Minnesota to win the Big Ten West.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's with Iowa and Wisconsin, struggling. It devalued the conference looks worse. And from ranking perspective, Minnesota, it's on you. And I think it's a great chance though for PJ Fleck. He is definitely rowing the boat there. But now it's time to put up because the pressure's on you now to win with everyone else struggling.
Yeah, luckily you have the Big Ten East, which is showing what they can do over there. All right,
Definitely.
Fresh, my next loser is the Baylor Bears, man. They gave BYU that game. I told you that game went on until 2:30 in the morning Eastern time. 14 penalties, 117 yards in penalties. And they were 50% on third down. They went 9 for 18 on third down, and they have 52 rushing attempts. Now, BYU did everything that we said in the preview. BYU kept everything in front of them, didn't give up those long plays, let the linebackers come up and make those tackles. 52 rushing attempts on 2.9 yards per carry, and they still had a chance. They still had a chance in this game, but then they just let it go. Blake Shapen looked really good early on in this game, and then all of a sudden, it just dropped off. You let BYU in this game. You could have taken control of this game. You could have ended it quickly. They had a chance to win it at the end, blew that chance. They had a chance to win in overtime, blew that chance. And they only ran 20 plays in their first 4 drives. They weren't getting any type of offense going here. I'm extremely disappointed in Baylor. You were the number 9 team in the country. But I will say this. BYU is starting to look like what we kind of thought about. Like, this was the first checkpoint for BYU on this season. We kind of guessed that maybe that the Cougars would have that level of talent to maybe make some noise this year in college football, and starting to look like we're right on that.
I mean, I watched the first half, and me being an old man, I kind of passed out and went to sleep around midnight. They Baylor, they had the foundation of a good program, but BYU, the way that they were able to rise above and address that, sometimes they're maybe more known for flashy offense historically, and maybe not the defense, but the way that their defense locked it down and made Baylor struggle and made Baylor work for every yard was a sight to see. I think for BYU to show maybe the real deal. Yeah, they have a very tough schedule, but with all the other group of 5 teams that were ranked and losing and guys falling down, BYU is now being elevated and has a real shot to make a run. And that strength of schedule could be really strong. But so by beating Baylor now, they still have Arkansas, they have Notre Dame left, they have a couple other guys in their schedule, but taking advantage of the moment, forcing Baylor into struggle moments was a huge win for BYU. But Baylor, there's definitely a foundation that Dave Arana's built there defensively. If they can just get the offense a little more fine-tuned, consistent, they will be around for a long time.
Yeah, they got Oregon next week, so we'll find out really how good BYU is. All right, Fresh, I got one more loser. How many you got one more for me?
I got one more. Colorado. Yikes. This team won a national title in 1990, 91 maybe? Early 90s. And that program was pretty solid, consistent through the 90s, early 2000s. But wow, that yikes. I mean, that's all I really could say. They have fallen off completely. They lost at home in week 1 to TCU, 38-13. And then this past week, they went down to Colorado Springs, take on the Air Force Academy. Now, Brad Richards there, the fullback, stud running back, had the 4th most rushing yards in the country last year. Air Force, pretty strong program. But you are the flagship institution for the state. You are a member of the Pac-12. You should be recruiting well and having a foundation of a team. You went down to Falcon Stadium, and they dropped bombs on you. There were B-52s and B-1 bombers, stealth bombers, A-10 Thunder. Everyone was coming in, just running, sorties and blowing you up. It was destruction, 41-10. What is going on up there? Other than recreational drugs that might be used up in Boulder, what is going on with the Buffalo program? Carl Durrell, you're not the answer. Maybe Mel Tucker knew he had to get out of town after 1 year with seeing what was in the cupboard, but there's maybe no. What's the recruiting like? Terrible. Colorado, you're horrible. You've got to change this. You're a once proud program. You have Ralphie there running in. It's really cool. The stadium's set up in a picturesque setting there at Folsom Field, but the product on the field is close to as abysmal as you possibly can get. And the standards got to change. Colorado State is going to build a foundation there. Air Force has a foundation right now. You are going to be surpassed as the 3rd best program. Yeah, the Colorado School of Mines might have a better football team than you right now. You've got to change things in Boulder, or you're going to be completely just a lost program forever. So get it turned around quickly before you are non-existent on the college landscape in regards to football.
Sad there. All right, Fresh, my last loser is the Houston Cougars. This was a team that everyone was really high on going into the season here, and they needed overtime to beat the Roadrunners last week. And then they thought, okay, well, you get a Big 12 opponent, but it's Texas Tech. This isn't Texas. This isn't Baylor. This isn't even like TCU. This is Texas Tech. They've struggled over the past couple years. And you gave up 35 first downs to Texas Tech. You gave up 468 total yards, 11 penalties, and Texas Tech ran over 100 plays on your defense. I think that everyone saw Cincinnati catch lightning in a bottle last year and really thought that Houston might be able to do the same. But that dream is over, and it might be turned into a nightmare for those down there in Houston, man. But very disappointed in the Cougars.
Yeah, they had a chance to win that ball game. And they let that one go. That was the big, 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 painful loss for Dana Holgorsen and the Cougs.
All right, let's talk about the good things from the weekend here, Fresh. I know we've sit there and rallied on some teams hard enough already. So talk to me about who you got for a winner from week 2.
First off, I'm going with Sam Hartman, Wake Forest quarterback. He had, the health blood clot, wasn't able to get on the field to start the season. No one really knew when that timetable would be. But seeing him come back, get fully cleared, return, under center for that Wake Forest offense, throw 4 touchdowns, 300 plus in the, a downpour there in Nashville, taking on Vanderbilt, was just a great thing to see for him as a person and a healthy guy and being back on the field, but also just get that Wake Forest program because they were a good team last year, and see him back there leading keeps them in the conversation in the ACC.
Yeah, my first winner, Fresh, is Nicholas Singleton, the freshman running back at Penn State. We talked about this kid in our preview. This was one of the reasons why we talked about Penn State being a sneaky top 25 team. We didn't have them in the real high up, but this was a reason why we had them in those 20s. Stat line goes for 10 carries, 179 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 2 big home runs, a run of 70 and a run of 44. You look at that and you even take, those 2 runs out, and the kid is still averaging close to 10 yards a carry. The last time Penn State had a running back go over 100 yards is 2020 against Michigan. Kavion Lee was the last 100-yard rusher. It's almost been 2 full seasons since Penn State's had this type of runner. Incredible job out of him. I can't wait to see what this kid does as a follow-up for next week.
I mean, that right there, what Penn State did, they took care of business. They didn't come in, they didn't mess around. They put their foot down and they got after it. And that's what good programs do when you have teams that come in like that. You take care of business and you get it done. right from the very start.
Yeah, my question is he going to be able to do that next week versus Auburn? But we'll tackle that question in our preview. Who you got next, Fresh?
Another team that took care of business, Miami Hurricanes. They were taking another Sun Belt opponent in Southern Miss. Frank Gore Jr.'s, coming back down where his dad played. Started out real sluggish. Southern Miss up 7-3. And then, like other teams around the country who decided to just continue to lay eggs, the Hurricanes decided to turn it on. That's why I give them the kind of winners that they understood the moment. They found ways to wake up in time. They were probably looking ahead to Texas A&M. I'm almost guaranteed they probably were, but they were able to shake it off, figure it out. Van Dyke started connecting with the receivers. Hurricanes defense locked it down, and they got the win. Just like you mentioned, Penn State, focusing, taking care of the moment, taking care of business. I call it TCOB, take care of business. There's games that you should, games are going to be competitive, and there's games that you should win. If you want to be a good football team, you've got to take care of business and dominate. And Hurricanes at least did that. They didn't get caught up in the moment of looking ahead to A&M next week.
All right, Fresh. My next winner is probably one of our favorite coaches in all of college football, Matt Campbell. Iowa State Cyclones finally getting that first win in the Cy-Hawk Trophy battle versus Iowa. Held Iowa to 150 yards. And again, we've talked a little bit about how bad maybe Spencer Petras is over there. But still, that Iowa State defense isn't something or that we were like fawning over. Like that wasn't an amazing defense. And they played really, really well. Also, big shout out to Jacksonville product, Xavier Hutchinson, 11 catches, 98 yards, and got the game-winning touchdown there. The thing that impressed me most is at the end of that game, Iowa State gets the ball on their 1 yard line. They get the ball on the 1 and travel 99 yards in 21 plays. They ate up over 11 minutes in clock time in there. You want to talk about taking control of a game and taking care of business? That's how you do it. That's how you win a rivalry game. Great job out of Matt Campbell. I was really worried about him, actually. I really felt that if Matt Campbell lost this game, we would have to kind of bump him down to what we view him as a college coach, but he finally took care of business and got over that hump.
Yeah, I mean, major props to them. That's a huge drive away that's a gut check moment for the program. Banding together against a very good defense and marching the length of the field, not just for a win, but a win over a rival you haven't beat in a long time. So huge, not just Campbell, but the entire staff and the entire program of rallying together and getting the job done.
All right, Fresh, where are you going next?
I'm going to go at Corvallis. Oregon State's 2-0. Don't look now. They're 2-0, and they haven't just beat slappies. They opened the season. They beat Boise State, a perennial powerhouse in the Mountain West. And then this past week, they picked my Mountain West champion pick, Fresno State, and Jake Haener, who's a very good quarterback, in Jeff Tedford's office. They went to Fresno State and beat them. Oregon State, they haven't won. They're not winning by 20 or 30, but they're beating two very, very good programs, and they're 2-0, setting a pretty good standard for the Pac-12 this past weekend, and moving forward, putting themselves on the map to make some serious impacts and get back to a bowl game, which they haven't been to in a while. So, 2-0 is 2-0, but when you beat two quality football teams, it gets attention. So major props to the Beavers there, and moving in the right direction.
Good job out of the Beavs, man. That's awesome. All right, Fresh. That's one OSU. I'm going to another OSU, and I'm going to Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders, 300 yards of total offense. Impressive. But the guy who really won this game, because we talked about Oklahoma State early in this year, and we said, who's going to step up for Oklahoma State? Who's going to take that pressure off of Spencer Sanders and be that offensive weapon? And Dominic Richardson was that guy. 27 carries, 131 yards, and a touchdown. Really took that pressure of Spencer Sanders to do everything. Also, defensive end Tyler Lacey, 1 sack, 2.5 tackles for a loss. The team finished up where I was kind of wondering about Oklahoma State's defense. If you went back and you watched their first week against a very, very average MAC team, you kind of were like, is that defense going to be good enough this year now that they lost Jim Knowles to Ohio State? 3 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss, but got to the quarterback 10 more times. impressive job out of the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of that game, flipping back and forth with the Florida Kentucky game, and they Arizona State was sort of hanging around early, but then Coach Gundy, Sanders, and that Oklahoma State team was like, all right, enough is enough. They looked at Herman Edwards and said, "You play to win the game," and they went out and did it.
All right, Fresh, you got any more winners? I got one more.
I got one more winner, and I'm going to Coach Stoops of Kentucky. Major props. There's a lot of questions coming into this game. The guy suspended. Rodriguez not playing. Offensive line was not exactly, you know, stellar versus Miami of Ohio in week 1. Come into the swamp, a lot of hype coming out. The Gators coming off that big win over Utah. Richardson playing pretty well that first week. They went ahead and they put in a defensive scheme that shut down Anthony Richardson. He was totally confused. And I think Billy Napier was even confused because they could actually run the football on Kentucky yesterday, but Napier kept wanting to throw the ball. And you had just terrible throws, Richardson missing guys in the wide open in the seam, communication issues on the pick six where was the defensive back playing off, playing on, receiver and quarterback weren't on the same page. He throws it out at the flat, and all he sees is a white, jersey there, picked to the house. Um, Defensive end there for Kentucky making a great play, one-handed interception on the dump out. Just they had Richardson rattled. They took away his ability to run. They sort of locked it down, did not give him open space on the edge to break contain, and they forced him to make plays with his arm. If I think if Florida had continued to run the football, maybe have more success because Kentucky special teams was terrible. But they didn't. They forced them away from it. They forced them to throw. And Kentucky Stoops, they grinded it out. They played ugly and they won. And in the end, they won the football game. They won a big conference game. And it's the first time they've beaten Florida in back-to-back years since the late 70s. And, Seth, me and you are both old, but we're not late 70s, born old. So it's been a long time. And Kentucky, they're not going to win it 50-10. They're going to beat you up. They're going to play physical football. And I think last night was a sign of that program that they're still there and they have depth as well. There's still some progress to be made for Florida and Richardson to get back on the same page and play consistent.
Yeah, Florida had a great win versus Utah. And I think both of us thought when the polls came out and they jumped Florida all the way up to number 12, both of us kind of shook our heads and said that's kind of ridiculous. That it's just a singular win. We really liked what we saw out of the Gators, and the Utah Utes are a darn good football team. You saw what they did last night, putting a 70 spot on Southern Utah or whoever else they played. I don't even know. But you look at the Gators, and it was the same problem that they had last year. They have a great rushing attack with Richardson, but they don't have anyone to throw the ball. And he's not that great of a passer. I'm almost tempted to tell them their backup quarterback, Jack Miller, is a 4-star passer. He's a decent passing quarterback. It may be time to start thinking about designing special packages for the Gators there. Because if they continue on this, if they're going to put all of their eggs in the Richardson basket, if he doesn't improve as a passer very soon, it's going to be game over for the Gators. But I think what we're learning here, Fresh, is not to doubt Mark Stoops. I really think that he has become a very, very respectable head coach there in Kentucky. And he's happy being at Kentucky, too. He's not looking for those bigger paydays or a bigger job in name only. But great job out of the Wildcats.
Yeah, I mean, Gators, we said they have no passing game, but they have a good stable of running backs, ETN, Johnson, and Wright. And if you can't become one dimensional though, especially in this league, you cannot become one dimensional. They've got to find a passing game. They've got to find a confident passing game. But Mark Stoops, Kentucky, I tweeted out last night. You better continue to show him love. I know there's been a spat with him and Calipari and what program is truly the icon of the school. Don't piss him off because you don't want to see him leave. He loves Kentucky. He's built Kentucky up to be a great football program. You don't want to see him mad and have him say, you know what, I'm going to go somewhere else. You've got a treasure there. He's built that program. He loves them. You need to own it up and continue to appreciate him.
Yeah, my last winner here, Fresh, is App State. And I got a bookend with these guys. We talked about the loser of Texas A&M, but App State, just a marquee win there. And I told you they dominated A&M in every way, shape, or form in that game. 315 yards of total offense. Held A&M to 9 first downs. controlled the time of possession 41 minutes. App State had the ball for 41 minutes, but huge shout out Cameron Peoples. Amazing game. 19 carries, 112 yards, was averaging almost 6 yards a carry against that respected, and I'll use that term loosely, A&M defense. So App State, like, my hat's off to you. I saw the video of the fans rushing the streets in West Virginia there, or North Carolina, sorry. North Carolina. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, they weren't running the streets in Morgantown because Kansas beat them in overtime. But definitely in App State and Boone, it's a fan base. They get game day coming there for the first time this next week. It's a really cool thing to see, and that's why college football is the greatest.
Yeah, I love it, man. This has been 2 weeks in a row that we've had just such great games that happen. So hopefully, this is the first weekend of the NFL season. Hopefully, NFL lives up to the expectations because college is taking care of doing their job. Even if you went back to, I believe it was Friday night, and Louisville UCF was a good game. So amazing weekend of college football here, and I can't wait to get into week 3, man.
I mean, the games are nuts. I mean, yeah, we have the Texas Alabama game. That was 2019, was fantastic. But then you have Kansas winning on a walk-off pick six in overtime to beat West Virginia. And then, Drew, our producer, his Bowling Green and Falcons losing 7 overtimes to Eastern Kentucky. And then Buffalo losing a Hail Mary to FCS Holy Cross. Like, craziness across the board that you really can't replicate in the NFL across the nation. Just nonsense and wild plays all over the place.
Yeah. So, guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're part of Spinnable Sports, so make sure you're going to spinnablesports.com. Yes, that is spinnablesports.com. Special thanks to our producer, Drew, and all of you who are listening out there, whether you're liking and subscribing to us on Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, Amazon Pods, whatever pods you're watching us on or hearing us on. Make sure you're subscribing, and leaving us those 5-star reviews because, Fresh and I, we're those 5-star prospects. Also, we're there on YouTube. Had our best ever episode last week. Amazing, amazing. Appreciate all of you guys. Follow us on Twitter. Had so much fun this past Saturday interacting with people, learning about, you all have a favorite team, but who's that second team that you kind of find yourself rooting for as long as they're not playing your favorite team? So make sure you're following us along on Twitter there, and we'll be bringing another week 3 preview your way early this week.
Bye, y'all.